Hello, good evening, everybody. So for whoever doesn't know me, I am London Pacheco George, and I am the Assistant Director for the Heinz Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And today begins the first of these fall series of e-talks for the Heinz Institute. And we have an amazing guest today. So in collaboration with Melba Butler, the Heinz Institute sort of paired entrepreneurship and social work and organizational change all in this amazing e-talk today, which we have Denise D'Agostino, who is the president of Possibility Plus and managing partner of Her New Standard. Denise brings practical approach and a high level of energy enabling leaders and teams and organizations to perform and deliver. Her authentic style builds trust, empowering others to gain insights and drive change. She balances her passion and practicality with her 25 years of experience working in the HR industry. So today's talk is going to be focusing on how to accelerate the acceptance of change through greater awareness and an open mindset. So Denise, the floor is yours and welcome.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be with all of you. One of my favorite things to talk about is how do we help people or systems or structures create change, move from one place to another place that hopefully gets them to something better. And I invite you all, as you're here today, to really think about this for yourself. It is helpful for you to personalize what change means to you, how you experience change, what reactions do you have to change. When you can better understand what it does to you individually, then as a entrepreneur, as a social worker, as just a person or leader, you really get a flavor for how can you help individuals change or systems change. So please think about this for yourself. Different experiences that you've had throughout your life where you've had to shift your mindset, shift your thinking to be able to accept something different or do something different and new. For those that are on without their cameras, if you're in a place that you can put it on, I'm going to invite you to do that. And those that don't have background noise, feel free to go off of mute. And what I'd like to start out with is asking you in the chat box, as we're going to talk today about the key factors to creating that change-ready mindset, we're going to also look at the benefits and essentials to shift individual thinking so that you can shift systemic change, and how to really exploring, well, how do you challenge your own thinking so that you can look bigger and broader to different perspectives. So as you're looking at these objectives that we'll cover in the next hour, put in that chat box for me and Melba, when you think about this, what do you really want to get out of the next hour? What would be most helpful based on either what you're working on or what a group of you are working on? So what do you really want to take away from this hour? You're dedicating and investing your time, which I'm thrilled about. So I want to make sure that I hit as many topics as we possibly can. So feel free to put that in the chat box and I will continue to look at that. Excellent. Okay, I was going to tease you and say, does everyone know how to get to the chat box? But I see things coming in now. Excellent, Julia, thanks. So balance, how do you manage or work through barriers to embracing change? Let's get a few more in there before we kick off for our first engaging question. All right, so as you're thinking of it, because they're not coming in fast. So I want to move us along. We have a lot to cover. Thank you. They're starting to come in. I want you to think about change. You know, we've been through so much crazy change lately. And with the pandemic, for example, in the United States, we've never really had to wear masks, yet we might watch TV and we see people wearing masks. That's one example of a change that has been put upon us. So we've had to deal with it. I want to ask you, and we're going to get you into small breakout groups. And I want you to start thinking about, in order to create change, what do you think is the most important thing needed? So think of yourself, for somebody to get you to do something different. What's the most important thing for you to address or deal with in order to create change? So thank you for sending in what you want to get out of the session. I'm going to ask Professor Pachenko, if you could send folks to breakout rooms. We're going to give you 4 minutes, and in your breakout group, talk about this question. And then you'll have a chance to come back and have somebody share with the group what were some of the ideas that you came up with. So we're going to send you off for 4 minutes, bring you back, come up with some ideas. You'll get a 60-second notice that we will be pulling you back to the large group. So let's kick it off, and I want to hear what some of the discussion was. So by a raise of the hand, who can share what your group discussed, just at a high level, what you think is most needed to create change? Yes, Kelly. And if you're on mute, just remember to go off mute.
Okay, so my group, we said confidence. You need to have confidence to make a change. We said the education behind it, resources and support. You need to have the desire and passion to change. You need to be have a plan and be organized. You need to know background on the change that you're trying to make.
Tell me more about that, Kelly. The background of what?
I mean, I guess it's specific to each different change, but just knowing what you're getting yourself into and the effects that it may have, and what could go wrong and like that.
Yep. Great. Wow, you guys had a really, really good list. Who else can share from another group? Let me see some other sharers. Who was in a different group? Let me see if
So I visited Amanda, Samantha, and Paula, and they had some great ideas.
Super. I was just looking at you, Amanda, so I'm going to call on you. We're going to have one more breakout, so the strategy may be to assign somebody as your speaker. But Amanda, can you go off mute and share with us what you spoke about, what ideas?
Yeah, so our group, we basically said for a change to happen, a person has to have an open mindset and be willing to have that change. And to create the change, a person has to think and basically be open to it.
Yeah, and having the open mindset, what's so important is think about yourself. People can't make you something, right? They might do something that influences how you think or feel and your behavior, but you're the one that's fully in control. So in order to make a change, it has to really be understood on a very personal level. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. Who else was in a different group? I want to get one more group. Maximus, what group were you in? You're on mute.
I was in a group with Kaylin, and I said that what's most needed to create change is a big enough problem where change is necessary. Okay. Like a huge problem where we have to resort to this method or something like that. Yeah. Like this pandemic, for example, we had to resort to quarantine because it was so bad.
Yeah. That's an excellent example, right? So change needs to happen when there's a sense of maybe stress to our safety.
A sense of urgency, I guess.
And a sense of urgency. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Maximus. Anybody else have something that we haven't covered? Okay, let me move us on and
Rachel
share.
has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, who does?
Rachel.
Rachel, share.
Hi, so my group, for an entrepreneurial mind, we said definitely determination,
Okay.
but for things like habits, like when you're changing habits, if somebody's smoking or access with alcohol or any of those kind of changes, you have to have that self-willingness to change.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of change than that entrepreneurial mind for creating something.
Yeah. So determination for more that entrepreneurial side, and the willingness or the urgency for personal. And that's, people always talk about being on diets, losing weight, stopping smoking, and you may have an urgency. For example, let's just say if you had a health infliction from smoking, but yet it's hard to break that habit. So even though that could be difficult, and habits can be extremely hard to break. And we'll talk a little bit about how to start to tap into that. And you talked at the beginning in the chat about how do you get past those barriers? How do you create that change or make that sustainable change stick? And I think I'll share one model with you that will get you thinking. Okay, you should see my screen now. So I want to share with you this model that is a change management model. You may or may not have seen it from ProSci, and it's called ADKAR. And if you look at the words in bold, it really is talking about how do you get ready, how do you change, get change to happen? How do you get that change ready mindset? So clearly creating awareness of the need to change is critical. So we aren't even aware. The pandemic hit us in the face, so we became aware really quickly. But there may be things that you want to do in a social setting that you can see a brighter future, and there's a need to change. So not everyone may be aware of the need to change or the better road ahead. Once you have the awareness, it's really then helping, you talked about this in your breakout groups, assessing the desire to support and participate in the change. And what I'll say to you here is that these first two stages are so important, because this is the point where, if you're aware, then the desire comes and we start to think about, how's it going to impact me? How am I going to be affected? I know what my life is right now. What am I going to have to do differently? How much stress is that going to put on me? And is that something I have the energy for, the desire for, the willingness for? So in order to change, there is an element of psychological safety that folks have to feel, and also a willingness to stretch out of your comfort zone, and to know that if you try to take on behaviors or actions or do things differently, that you are actually going to be okay doing them. As human beings, we learn how to survive, and some of the things that we do will protect us and keep us safe, but they may not always help us grow or get to a different place that might be even better for us. Once you have the awareness and the desire, you need the knowledge. You spoke about that in some of your breakout groups. So you need that. Somebody needs to be able to communicate a vision, like what is it going to look like when we change? And what do I need to know in order to make that change? So that could be information you need to have. You may need to understand the why for the change, but you also need to have an idea of, okay, what's in it for me? You know, what is going to be different, better for me if this change happens? And then the ability to change, to implement the change. So you talked about the resources, you talked about maybe there was training or confidence that was needed. Do you have the ability? Do you have what it will take to make that change happen? And then reinforcement, and this will come as you all work on change management plans or change initiatives. If you do not figure out a follow through or a pull through or a way to continually come back to touch base with folks, it's hard to change a habit. It's hard to create change. So those little reinforcement touch points for people are really critical so that we could bake in a different habit in order to do things differently. So I'm going to pause there, and you could feel free to, by a show of hands or raise your hand electronically. How does this hit you? What questions is it bringing up for you? Who has a question or how this is kind of hitting them as you're thinking about maybe change initiatives that you're trying to create?
I just think it's really smart to have the different steps, because I think sometimes if you just jump into something and it doesn't go well, you kind of feel really devastated. And I think if you kind of stop yourself at the beginning before you start and make sure that you're prepared for it,
Yeah.
You'll feel better about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's, thanks, Julia. It's so important to really think about where is it I want to, you know, take people? How do I want to shift from today to the next stage, and what's going to be needed? What else came up for you?
There's a message in the chat.
Oh, good. So with the pandemic and change, we do not know when the pandemic really is going to change or get better. So how do we handle that? Yeah, so that's a good question. How do we handle that? So from a change perspective, I think Maximus talked about this, right? It's, you know, you think about what do we need to do to be safe? If any of you think about, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, we as individuals want to know that we're safe. So while we don't know there's an end to the pandemic, we don't know when, we know it will end. But what we know is we need to keep our mental and physical health of ourselves and our family. So you need to then identify and get information, right? You need to find out what's going on around me, how many cases are there, what is the danger, if you will, out there, and then what can you personally do so that you can not contribute to it getting any worse, but that you could help it get better. So that's, if you think about it, you have to get aware of what's going on in your environment. You have to really understand, okay, am I willing to do what I need to do to get past this? Because each one of us contributes to it. And then you go down the model, right? So it's the it's the knowledge of what you need to then do, and then carry on. Go buy a mask, put it on, and you keep at it, finding, you know, until you have to shift, and something in the structure changes, right? Till the pandemic is over, that's what you need to do. What other thoughts with this model, how you could use it?
So in our class, we're working on a plan for workshops for a week of the Peacemaker. And our focus is going to be on racism and racism in the pandemic.
Okay.
Who's safe? I got the other question mark, but one of the questions is who is safe. And so in order for the audience, which is largely other Iona students, to buy into our message.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what of this resonates for you as you think about the workshops you're planning.
So let's hear from some. Thank you for that. Let's hear from some as you're thinking through maybe these 5 areas. Where do you think you've got it covered, and where do you think you need to pay more attention to? Kelly, go ahead.
I think, like, for me personally with change, it's like the reinforcement that, like, I think I would need to work on the most when I'm going through a change. But I think, like, when we were talking, I was thinking back on, like, you know, changes that I've made in my life, and I feel like I really do go through all these steps without really knowing it. So I do think that it is really, like, useful to think about. I mean, especially when we were planning our week of the Peacemaker presentations, because change is a big topic when it comes to racism. So it will be helpful when planning that as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Kelly. Other thoughts how you can use this in your the Peacemaker project?
Well, I observed when we went to watch the presentations last year that the different groups would give handouts sometimes, or ask people to write something down. They definitely did something to make it memorable so that when we walked away from it, we remembered the information. So I think that's important to do again this year also, to make it something that doesn't just leave their minds after they leave the room.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's great. It's great, right? Because we have so many things coming at us on a daily basis, every minute by minute. So to have different ways to remember it, it could be, you know, an email or a handout or something. So that's great. Good. Anything else? All right, let me move on. I thought we'd spend a little bit of time really on the first stage, which is talking about awareness. And awareness basically lets us think about yourself as an individual and a change that you need to make, and how you tend to react to it, both inside what you're thinking, but as well as your actions, what others see. So change as an individual or as an organizational unit or a system really is only possible once we're aware. I think somebody said it before, right? What is the real problem or the issue? So bringing the awareness to it and the criticality or the sense of urgency for the change is super important. So let me share this with you, and I want you to start thinking about a change that you were asked to make. When you have had to change something, it could be somewhere, living somewhere new, or you know, joining a different friend group that you're trying to connect with and build relationships with, or if you need to stand up and do a presentation in front of a group and this is something very different for you, this is a change. So I like you to think about it in terms of taking time for yourself to really go inside and think about, okay, what are my thoughts? What am I feeling? And what's the actions? And this is so important to do, because when you start to understand and become hyper aware of what's happening with you inside, then you can understand and regulate how you approach things outwardly. So if that makes sense to you. So if you think about your thoughts, so if you have somebody come up and say something to you, and let's just say a friend says to you that they, you know, hey, I don't really like that outfit that you're wearing. And so right away, you're thinking something. right? This situation happens and you start processing and thinking. And what I'm asking you to do is when you have a need to shift your mindset, it's important to understand what's happening. What are you thinking? What's that inner narrative, right? What immediately comes to your mind? You may or may not curtail that thought, but what are those thoughts? And why are you, just observe it and understand why, what's going on? What am I thinking about? What do I want? How do I want to react? And also ask yourself how your values inform your thoughts. So what do I mean by that? If I expect somebody to be loyal and loyalty is a value of mine, and they come and they go, oh my gosh, Denise, you're wearing that orange shirt that makes you look awful. Like all of a sudden in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's saying that to me. That's not, it's not a kind thing to say. And maybe she's not my friend. And so you start to have all those thoughts, which then if you could create the space to know that you're having that thought and that feeling, then you can dig into it. Why do I feel that way? Is that an overreaction or an underreaction? Do I not feel safe? Do I feel threatened in some way? So if you think about what that feeling is that's happening, you can create a space, create time to just think about what's happening and be able to process. So how many people have your parents or your friends or your teachers ever said to you, take a minute, count to 10, take a minute, go for a walk? How many have had somebody say that to them before they take an action? Okay. So it's like, take a breath, go for a walk, don't react. So understanding, and what I'm hoping is this will really resonate with you as you leave the session, because understanding what's happening inside of your head will help you then create the behavior you want outside. So once you know what's happening, create that 5-10 second pause. I always say to people, take a deep breath, take a few breaths, and then you're able to ask yourself, okay, well, did I take an action? Did that action help the situation, or did it hurt the situation? Am I getting those results that I want, or am I really flaming up a situation? So if you think about it in these terms, and if you spend some time, let me just go back, creating that space, hit that pause button and reflect on what's happening, make a conscious decision of how you're going to react in a way that serves the situation and helps you advance. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and I want you to think about the model of thoughts and feelings and action. And what I'd like you to do, I'm going to ask Professor Pacheco if you could hit the breakout groups again, and we'll go in there for about 6 minutes. And I'd like you to talk about how you tend to make intentional decisions about how you show up in order to consciously control your behavior or change your reaction from what you would normally do, the habit go-to reaction that you would have. So we're going to give you about 5-6 minutes in the groups, and please assign a spokesperson. And then when you come back, you can share what you're really taking away from this. All right, so let's jump right in, because our time is going to run short and I want to dig a little bit into strategies. But what was the conversation? Who would like to share around the thought? Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, so my group, we talked about, like, whenever we're making some kind of change, we really sit on our thoughts and feelings before we make an action. Like, we spend a lot of time, thinking like what our parents would think or what our friends would think. And like, even if we are making a decision, there's always like a voice kind of, telling us, like, playing devil's advocate, like trying to see if it's the right decision. And also, like, sometimes more than sometimes more than one person can be affected by a change. So you want to consider like their beliefs and like values and securities, like everything like that before you go and like make a change.
Yeah. Yeah, so Kelly, thank you. Because I think in the other group I joined briefly, that whole concept of feeling comfortable and safe and that you're going to be okay. I know in the chat somebody said, I'd really like to get out of this. How do you have the confidence, or that you can actually facilitate change? And I hope that you take away from this that if you can listen to people, let their voice be heard, let them feel, express their perspective, then you're able to start to help them to think, okay, this person I'm speaking with has my best interest at heart, cares about me. They're not gonna, do something that puts me in harm's way. They're not gonna make fun of me or whatever. And then they'll be more likely to be open to listen. You've got to get people in the space where they feel comfortable, that they can then listen to you, and then truly they're able to hear, okay, what is that thing she wants me to do or he wants me to do, and why? So thanks, Kelly. Who else had something from another group? Who was in a different group? Paolo, were you in a different group? You're on mute.
All right, so yeah, just like Kelly, we were actually saying the same thing. It's like whenever you want to make a change, you overthink about it. You basically be like, okay, what are the pros and the cons of what I'm going to do? Is it gonna be worth it? Like, what are people gonna think about it? And what will be the outcome of it? So it's like when we make a decision, it's like we be like, okay, this is my final decision, but still we're like, I don't know if it was a good idea, but here we go.
Yeah. And let me share with you some thoughts of strategies to create that change. If you are able to open up a dialogue and a discussion, that will help. If you can clearly articulate what the change is, why they should do it, how it will help them, what will be different, and how you can help them with whatever resources or training. So I think it's so important, but really to understand others' perspectives before you deliver a solution helps them buy into the change. If you say, unless it's pandemic, and even look at pandemic, people don't want to wear the masks, and there is a compelling reason, some believe, to wear the mask. So making sure people's perspectives are heard will help them kind of, number one, it educates you and informs you, but it also helps them kind of lower any barriers they might have to start to accept the need for that change. Who else has something? Alina, were you in one of those groups or a different group?
Kelly's group.
You were in Kelly's group.
Oh yeah, she was in my group.
Okay. Who else has something that we haven't talked about yet?
There's only 3 groups.
Oh, okay. All right. Then there was my other group. Crystal was in it. Who else was in that group? Samantha. Amanda. So let me open the floor because we only have a few minutes left. And if you could put it in the chat box, that would be super helpful. What is the real key takeaway from today for you so that you could understand change from an individual level so that you can help drive whatever, the larger scale change, racism during the pandemic? That certainly is where you need to understand people's perspectives, right? So what's your big takeaway from today that you can go back and apply to your projects or your life?
You want people to put it in the chat.
Reflection is a big
Yeah,
thing
put it
for
in
me.
the
I
chat.
never really
Share. Sorry?
don't know who was speaking.
It was me, but I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it though. Oh, it's Alina. Eleni.
Eleni?
Eleni.
I was just gonna say the reflection part of what you said. Yeah. The reflection part of what you said kind of stuck out to me because it's not something I would really consider about change, but sometimes if you reflect on it, it might influence better. For like example, I'm an RA here, so we always tell people to like put on their mask if they don't have them on, but sometimes we say your mask, like just as a reinforcement, like a thank you, like maybe it shows that we're actually paying attention and we're caring about the situation in a way.
Yeah, yeah, good, thanks. All right, so anything else from the outside, you could feel free to put it in the chat, but anything that folks would like to share? All right, well, we have a minute left. I'm going to read through those comments in the chat. I would encourage you to take one thing that you learned from today and really implement that for your own personal self, but because that's where you can start to make change, and then you can help make it with others as well. And there are resources. I don't know if we can get them to you. There's a few books that I was suggesting you might want to tap into. So I'll just make sure that you have those available. They could be sent out. Thank you for having me, you guys.